thanks for rejoining me. I really appreciate this, and I know it's a time commitment. Yes, I did get what you sent, and I want to give you an award of some kind as the single person in the entire history of my play of Champions who said, "Oh yeah, I'll make up the character," and did so pretty much without any modifiers, which is crazy. No one has ever seemed to do it.
Sometimes that
Yeah.
happens. Yeah, sometimes a character power concept lends itself to modifiers, and sometimes it doesn't.
Completely
And
agree. Yeah.
yeah, with this one, I wanted something very. I hate to use the word simple, but not something overly complex because it was a new version of the system. I wanted something more straightforward, and it just came out like that. It didn't lend itself to being.
Well, I spotted a couple
elaborate.
of places, just like we said in the exchange. There were a couple of places based strictly on what you'd said, where a couple of them cropped up. The only one that really strikes me as useful or really consistent is modifying the awareness. And you had mentioned in an email that in the last bit that you were considering some kind of trickiness on it or something. And I was thinking that there's one called Shutdown, a new limitation called Shutdown. I don't know if you saw that.
I might have seen that. I put an activation wall on it.
Yeah. The way that Shutdown works is there's a mild and a severe form. And if you have a mild shutdown on a power while using it, you're basically less active. You have less options. You can still observe things. You can interact with others. You can move about a little bit, but you're pretty much not going to be carrying out any attacks or interesting actions of other kinds. Whereas the severe form of shutdown, as you can probably anticipate, means you're out. You're effectively KO'd. And so the use of the mild shutdown on the sort of internet awareness that you were talking about struck me as at least an interesting option, because you weren't really talking about it as like a combat awareness. You were thinking of it more as a great big, kind of tune into the ether kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And at least at this point in the character's development, it seemed to make sense that was kind of a significant act.
It's kind of counts like concentration from the other books. That probably make more sense than the activation roll. I had put the activation roll out because I thought like the power is always there, but you can't necessarily effectively utilize it.
Right. Well, the both of them are certainly suitable. One thing about so basically, we're looking at that kind of a limitation. Sure. As far as everything else, you're right. I mean, she flies, she blasts, she's tough, moderately strong. I wanted to take a look at this whole three-cornered thing. I think it's a pretty good image. You went, when I said, okay, let's nail it down. Who is the DNPC? And sure enough, as soon as you got that going, the character turned into her own. She became the right kind of XP, right? You're thinking Starfire, and then it's like, no, this is Nebula now.
Yeah.
Right. And I liked that, So the only other consideration at this point was visual. When she glows, what color is it? Basically, who inks it and what does it look like? And what I've found is that when we start playing, all I do is ask questions. The first time the player says, what's it? I fly. I say, all right, is there a trail behind her or something? And the player tells me and tells us, everybody sitting there. And sure enough, it's set. We know. We know what color. We know whether it's little sparklies or whether it's, or what, and it's a big deal, actually. I remember this was actually not in a game that I played, but I remember a fellow Champions enthusiast told me that he made a character who jumped or flew with a real concussive blast starting off starting it off.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and his character was real big on sort of the rods and beams of force, kind of thing. And he talked about how the very first scene that they played, when he lifted off and the GM said, well, okay, this is that kind of concussive thing, right? And the guy says, yeah. So the game master says, cool. Well, all right, the sidewalk's cracked, where you took off. And just that bit right there just nailed it down. It was like this visceral moment of play. And I've seen that in Champions before. I've seen it a lot. And all of a sudden, your flight's not anyone else's flight. And so with that, in mind, looking at Nebula, and let's take a look at some of these numbers, and we find that I haven't actually run the numbers with the new limit, with that limitation on the awareness, but if that's the only thing with a limitation,
it's 1/2 for the my regular and +1,
right,
for the total.
Yeah. Did you notice that we can talk a little bit about these limitations in a minute. So, but let's carry on with this character just for a bit. So the kind of awareness that you wanted was a special sense, because it's internet. And it was, I think, just basically situational. I mean, I don't know if it was this whole regional thing, whether it was expanded or not. But that's up to you. But I can't remember.
No, it was just what's in her general area.
Right. So if we look at awareness and find the general awareness, that's 20 for the basic cost. And then with the special sense, I think it's +10. So that makes 30. So 30 points with a half limitation. Good old classic Champions math. Nothing new school about this. We end up with 20 points.
It would be 20 point for the elemental control, 20 point for the blast, and 20 point for the flight.
Was there anything else?
That'd be 60 points for those.
Right.
And then for the awareness, would that be in or out of the elemental control?
That's out, because it first of all, at 30 points, it's not eligible, but more importantly, it doesn't cost endurance. And the prerequisite for an elemental control is that the power has to cost endurance. So that puts us at actually 80 points total, because there's only those 2 powers in there right now, correct? Or were there 3?
No, nope, that's it. Okay. So it'll be 80 points total for the powers.
So now we're taking a look at the characteristics. And I noticed you adjusted a couple of things, which is fine. For the strength, it was 20 points, no points for presence. Body, we stuck at, what was it? Pretty heavy, right? 14?
Yeah, 40.
Yes, that's 40 points. Speed, we left down at 2, correct?
Speed's only 2.
Right, so that's actually pretty cheap at this point, relatively speaking. And then let's hold off on defense just for a second, because defense is the wiggle. That's the wiggle thing. It's the only thing that costs 1 point per point. So I let that one. I mean, basically, if you're needing a place to dump a couple of points due to rounding and stuff like that, that's where it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
You may have noticed that in this design, there's no weird shaving in the unmodified cost or the unmodified value of a power. So, for example, you can't get 23 points of blast or something like that. It's you want to die a blast, it's 5 points straight off. And there's no rounding. There's no Goodman school of effectiveness at that point.
Okay.
At all. There's nowhere in the rules that lets you do it. It's all 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And then 1 point for the unmodified, for the cheap defense. Okay. But therefore, the only rounding comes if you use modifiers. So if you're dividing by 1.75 or something like that, then if you get a fraction, then you round. But that's the only place. So you can't round on one end and round on the other like you used to.
Okay.
So, all right. So back to it. You had a high dexterity, if I'm not mistaken, right?
13.
Right. So that's 20 points. And then for intelligence and ego, we're leaving them at the default. Yeah. You have this option for 10 points. You could take 4 of them at a time and upgrade your current defense point by point to resistant. So you could get 2 of your points being resistant by basically upgrading them to 5 points apiece. So for 8 points, you get 2 of your points resistant, spend 2 more, total of 12, 2 of which are resistant. You could do that. Or if you want to bag all that and just say, okay, I just want 20 points of defense and I'll just fear piercing attacks until I beef up a little.
All right. So you're saying, like, for my defense, drop it down to get rid of the resistance, so it'll be only 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cost would go to
10.
40?
No.
10.
Right. If you want non-resistant defense increase, it's point for point. Let's start with the
now on the character is 20, 10 resistant,
which is really quite pricey. Basically that's that's
50 points.
Yeah, exactly. And at the moment you've only got 10 to spare. Now, one thing you could do is drop that body to 13, which gives you 20 points to play with for your defense. And that's 20 is not bad at all. Actually, 20 points to use for more defense. You could easily take 3 resistant. Yeah. So you could get 10 plus 5 plus 5. You could now have 20 points of defense.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry. 18 points of defense, 3 of which are resistant.
And that would cost how much?
20 points.
Only 20? Wow. So the resistant part's very expensive.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
what I've done is I've priced both killing and resistance to it way up. It's functional, but it's all way up over there.
So defense, the regular non-resistant defense is point for point.
Right.
And there's no separate PD ED, it's just a 1 value.
Correct. Yeah.
And so
additional resistant defense is 5 points per point. And so then if you want to make one of your current points resistant, therefore that's 4.
I see.
And the math works out, so however you approach it, it's all going to turn out the same cost. So the way it works, therefore, would, in your case, if you took, let's just be easy about it. Say you took 3 points of resistant defense, that's 15. That's 15 points right there.
Right.
So now you have 13, 3 of which is resistant. So you got 5 more points to play with. Toss 5 more on top of that. That makes 18, 3 of which are resistant.
Okay.
Which is actually a pretty nice starting point for your character, if you ask me.
18 and 3, so it's 15 points for 15.
Right. 15 points for you.
15 basic defense.
Yeah, but that's only going to cost you 5 because you've already got 10 for free.
So the body adds to the defense. There's a base. No?
You just have 10 points of base defense for free. You just do.
Okay. That
helps because you were thinking about going down to 2 as a starting
0.
point. No. To tell you the truth, I did have that as a playtest step, was to start with defense 0 and you just had to buy it up because I was tired. I was really tired of all these base values. I was trying to get rid of as many base values as I could, but I finally realized that no, everybody needs to walk around with, every starting superhero needs to walk around with 10 defense, period. And also, I mean, whoever just left PD and ED at 2?
Yeah,
right?